Is he still out there?
I mean, it's 7 minutes after we need to go to start.
Hmm. Gonna check to see if we're live.
Yeah, okay. Yep, just went live.
Just went live. All
Hey,
right.
Hi, everybody. I'm Grant. This is Marvin, DP. We have one other guy here. I can see back at his booth, named Manny. And we're basically ComicsBurgh. We're 4 independent creators. We each do our own comic books. And what I say when I mean independent comic books, I can't tell Marvin what to do with his comic book, and he can't tell me what to do with my comic book. I mean, he could try, but he wouldn't get very far.
I'm very influential.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about today is the process of creating a comic book. Are any of you guys interested in making comic books?
Right.
Okay, cool.
Do you have an idea?
I have an idea for like a concept for the story, but like I was talking to Marvin earlier, the thing I've been struggling with is figuring out, even if I write down the story, how do I translate the story to comic panels and art? I can't draw.
Okay, so I can maybe kind of answer that. Even if you don't draw, you can do like basic little sketches. I don't. Do you guys write full scripts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't. I'm going to be honest with you. This first step, I skip that step. I go straight to drawing, and then in the margins, like I'll write like what I think the dialogue should be.
Right. I mean, that's the Marvel method. That's how Marvel does it. So the way Marvel does it is they write a plot out, and then the artist draws the book, and then they come after the fact to do the dialogue and pen.
So the reason why I don't write a full script is because I can't wrap my head around how you know how many panels should. What's he pointing at?
Oh, close the door. Yeah. Thanks.
I can't wrap my head around how to figure out how many panels should be on a page if I don't see it like visually. So just so you know, you don't have to necessarily write out a full script like this. You can just go straight to layouts. So after layouts, then my friend Antonio does the pencils for it, and then I ink it. So now, as you can see, there are differences in all of these. So he's making changes from my layouts, and I'm making changes from his pencils to the finished inks. So a little bit lower, we have flats. Now, if you notice, the thing about the flats is the colors look kind of neon. Like you might wonder, like, why would I color it like this? So the reason why they do this is because I hire somebody to do the flats, and they're not necessarily an artist. They're just somebody who likes to color in these lines. I mean, I guess they could color it in a way that if they wanted to, but
Thank you.
really the important thing is just coloring in the lines.
Just wanted to let you know, be careful about closing this completely because
It
it will
locks.
lock everybody out, and you guys should be able to escape probably. Thumbs up.
Thanks.
So after the flats, then I do like what's going to be more like the finished colors. The next step is adding like highlights and shading. And this is all done in Photoshop, but there are a lot of different coloring and drawing programs that you can do this in. And that's another thing. There are still artists who work on like with a pencil and a paper and pen. I'm not one of them. All of this from beginning to end is done on a computer, and that's more, you know. Would you mind cracking that a little bit just so people can still get in? Thank you. Perfect.
Appreciate
And that a lot goes back to like your personal preference. And then obviously the last phase, well, other than getting it printed, the last step is lettering. which you can see. There are still people who hand letter, like for instance, Jim Rugg and Tom Scioli are guys who are here. Me personally, I think they're crazy because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, and it maybe looks slightly better, but I would rather just do the computer.
Right, but you have to think also that before the 90s, all of this was done with people all in one space. So you did the scripting, you did the penciling, the inking, and it was all done pretty much the same time. Even the coloring was done on the pages themselves. It wasn't until Image came along where they started doing digital coloring. So Marvel was still doing
comics.
Yes. So Image Comics, when Jim Lee and McFarlane and all those guys left Marvel and DC and formed Image, they specifically brought they joined with a company that was doing digital coloring because they could then hire someone to do it overseas or someone who was in another state, because it became to a point where you couldn't bullpen. That was what they would call it, bullpen. Everybody would be all in the same space doing the work. And once you got to a point where these guys were becoming superstars, they didn't have time to have everybody in the space. So it was more farmed out for the digital things.
So when he was talking about the process, and you could don't cover your face. As far as an idea, so it took me about 5 years to come up with the concept for what I published to call it The Theme of Thieves, a time travel mystery comic. So when I got to that point, I actually got into like a writing room, so to flesh out like my ideas and everything. So that's even before I even got to like the whole writing the panel and the script process. Got into like a writing group, fleshed out the ideas. They read some of my scripts and everything, and they gave me feedback. That helped me a ton as far as getting the finished product of what I actually wanted to put on page. So when I did that, I started the whole script process. I used Scrivener. That was a really great comic program. I don't know what you guys use. Scrivener. It's a writing program that's actually great for comics because it has a comic template where you can actually place in your dialogue, characters, anything that you want to write as far as, so you can actually break it down for artists when you eventually hire them to do your artwork. SCRIVNER. Yeah. Okay.
And I have a Word template. The same.
Yeah.
I use a Word. There's a Word template that I found that has all the breakdowns and everything. You just have to put it in.
Yeah.
I can send that to you.
Makes it like real easier, So yeah. So once I got the script together and everything, finally, going to like the group and stuff, went on search trying to find my artist. I went to Instagram, DeviantArt, conventions like these and everything where they have like artists and stuff.
There are a lot of different Facebook groups.
Different Facebook groups.
I think if you search like comic creators, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and basically, we're just looking at people's portfolios and everything. Found an artist actually here in Pittsburgh, Dan Ekus, he did my first 2 issues. Got really lucky, and we struck a deal, and he did my first 2 issues. For personal reasons, he had to buy out the 3rd issue, so I ended up finding a guy on Upwork from Venezuela. He actually came through because he worked for like Marvel and DC and was looking for work, so I ended up hiring him, and he did these panels here for my 3rd issue of Theme of Thieves. That's in, as you can see here, he has his pencils and inks on the end there. The flats like Grant was talking about, all the way up to like lettering, which is done by a guy named Marco Della Verde, and he's out of I think he's from Australia. So global. You can find your artists anywhere.
I mean, and that's been the advantage from our sake from the internet, because I started way before these guys. I'm back in 2003, so this is back on America Online. And I met my artist on a website called Digital Webbing, which I think is still up, but I think they moved to Facebook. So I've been working with him for 15 years. And we formed kind of a rapport where I used to have to do all the breakdowns, but I don't have to do that anymore. I just tell him this is happening, and I let him go do the work. So that means like if it was like a movie, it was like having two cameras. So you got two people pointing at the camera in different ways, and in most situations, we don't argue about anything. Like if he makes a change, it's perfectly fine. We make that change because he probably has a better eye on it than I do because he's doing one. So when you're doing that script, it's depending on who you're working with and who that artist is, how much detail you're going to have to put in that, because sometimes you have to tell them, like if there's something key in that panel that you need to say. So you say there's a lamp on the table that's going to get knocked over in a fight. You have to specifically have that in the script, or the person who's doing the art won't remember that piece. If you say that later on, then a lamp broke, and he'll say, "What lamp? I didn't draw a lamp. There was no lamp there. What are you talking about?" So when you're first starting with someone, you have to be very specific on that. So your pages could be very long, your panel work could be very long, your dialogue could be very long. But one of the things you have to always remember is that when you send it out for when art comes back, some of that dialogue can change because it might not fit into that panel, or you might cover something up that's important. So there's a lot of steps in the process. There could be a lot of back and forth. Even if you got to the colors, if a colorist colors something and it doesn't have the right emphasis, or something they want to focus, you want something focused on, they miss that, you won't have to come back. So this is why, like, this could be a 6 year process just for one issue. And I mean, I got a lot of issues done because I started a long time ago, but I mean, it's a process. Go ahead.
One of the things I found out trying to develop my own stuff, you got to be alert to mediums. You got a vertical spread.
Yeah.
You got a 2-page spread.
Yeah.
It better be vertical because the young folks
read
it on their phone.
Yep.
And if it's a horizontal spread, they're totally messed up.
Ooh, that's another thing that I've run into, because what's that it's the one popular manga webtoons, yeah. So I'm sort of like developing my comic into like webtoon format, and it's a whole different beast. It sort of changes the whole style of like what my story is. I still got like the basis of it, but I'm finding that the simple, like what you said, just, you know, spreads and all that, it doesn't translate as well, you know, on a webtoon. So you got to like reconfigure your panels and stuff just to make it make sense, because you're right, young people who like, you know, reading their comics on their phones and everything, they prefer a certain way. Yeah. And they this is, you know, when you're on your phone, you're like, you know, scrolling up and all that stuff. So you got to figure out a way to translate, because you still want to get your story out. You know, you still want to try to find a way to, you know, communicate with them and still do what you're doing. So I mean, I totally agree on that.
So once you got all your art done and you got your book ready to go, so now you're going to a printer. So printing costs are going to depend on how many books you print. So the more you print, the cheaper it gets. So this is why Marvel and DC are still able to sell their books for $3.99 or $2.99, because they're printing 10,000 books. We're not printing 10,000 books on the most orders that we put in. So that's why we have to charge a little bit more, because the printing costs are a little bit more higher. So once it's off to the printer and you get your box in the mail, it's the happiest day of your life, because you have something in your hand that you created. I mean, I still get that feeling now. I mean, I'm 10 issues deep into my book, and it's still the same feeling every time when you open that box and you see something that you created. As long as there's no mistakes, because mistakes happen, and sometimes pages are stuck together or a page is out of order. But I mean, you're still pretty happy with that. Sometimes you get a few books that are damaged, but you're able to then pick it up and say, I did this, I created this. And then the hard work starts. So you've done the hard part, now the harder stuff. Now you have to get distribution. So there's multiple methods in distribution. So what you're looking at is you're going to probably want to just go to any store that's local to you. That's probably the easiest process. You probably know those people who work in those stores. So, you know, like your New Dimensions, your Phantom of the Addicts, your Gigadrum, K&J Comics are going to be your lifeline into the industry, because they can give you feedback that other stores probably won't be able to do, because you can't reach them physically. And then you're doing conventions, so you're working on pitching something to someone, or talking to people, or getting your spiel together, so that the elevator pitch, and you've got a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to capture someone's attention as they're walking past your table looking for Pokemon cards or something. So it's like, hey, come over, take a look at my book. It's brand new. It's the spiel, man. And I'm going to tell you about it, and I'm going to tell you as fast as possible to try to get you interested in this book. So you want to give me your money instead of spending it on Spider-Man #1.
So we are artists and creators. We rather create and do the artwork. We have to do the oil and water stuff, to do the business side on top of it, because obviously we want to get our stuff out and everything. So we have to take off our, you know, artist hats and stuff, and then put on our business hats to, you know, go to the stores and, you know, go to like distribution and stuff, until we get to the point where, you know, we can hire people to do all that for us. So, but it's a process.
Everything's a process, and the one thing that I think that a lot of creators get stuck on is the marketing aspect. I can create all day long. But what I like to say is that what you'll find is most creators are introverts and they don't want to talk to people. But except for us, we like to talk. But it's a work up to it, right? When I did my first show, I was in the corner. What's going on? It's so big. Everything's bigger than life. So you're happening to the point where I want to slow it down and figure out a pattern of talking to people. And someone's walking past, make eye contact with them.
Yeah.
And make eye contact with them. You got it. You got them for that, at least those 2 seconds that you can pull them over and say, hey, look at my book. Hey, look at Grant's book. Hey, look at DP's book. And that's what we want to do, is that we want to get stuff for ourselves, but then we want to say, hey, you like sci-fi, you like horror, you like fantasy, we've got other books along in a way. So then the next part is that, like I said, that marketing aspect is that if you can't sell a book, then after you created it, you're going to fail on that second. You probably won't even get to the second book. And that's one of the things that when you talk to people, they'll say, okay, I made 1 book. I can't even do the second book because I couldn't sell the first one. So marketing, personability, being able to talk to people, being able to get on those phone calls. Because even though our books are in the Diamond huge catalog, it goes to every store in the country and the world, they still don't know who we are. I mean, if you've seen that catalog, it's a phone book. It's a phone book that you're flipping through. You're looking for something special. When we first got our books in the stores, into the catalog, I called the stores, and the stores were telling me, I wouldn't even noticed your book if you wouldn't have called. And I'm glad you called, and I appreciate you calling me. I appreciate you communicating with us. Like, we communicate with stores every month, something that Marvel, DC, and other ones don't do. So like that gives us a leg up on getting our product into the store. So,
you know, since Marvel and DC left, they've been a lot more receptive to small publishers. How hard is it still to get into Diamond?
So we kind of got into that position right after COVID. So I sent in a pitch package, and I waited like 2 months, and no one got back to me. So I contacted again. They said, "Oh, no one's been into the office, sitting on someone's desk probably." So they said, "Send it to digital." So after like a week, they said, "Yeah, you're in." But what I found after the fact is a few people that came after us, they told them no. They told them either you don't have enough books, or your marketing, because you have to send a marketing package to Diamond. Your marketing package wasn't good enough. So it came at a good time for us, but then a bad time for other people.
What are their marketing packages? You buried the lead.
Yeah. So the marketing package that you're sending Diamond is how does my book stand out on the stand next to 1,000 other books? So you're telling them, okay, so how are you going to pitch your book to the store? How are you going to get the store to buy your 5 copies over just buying 5 more copies of Batman and Spider-Man? So our pitch was, we communicate with these stores. We talk to them. We know these people. We know them on Facebook. There was a Comics Pro seminar here 2 years in a row where we got to sit down and talk to the retailers. So that was our end into that, was our pitching to retailers directly and having total communication with them. And I think that greased the wheels, and I think that we got a lot of push from the retailers back to Diamond saying, hey, yeah, we want these guys' books in our stores.
2 more, and I'll go.
Yep.
How many books do they want you to have in print already? And how long I heard it takes a while to get paid from you guys too. So it's waivers sometimes, because like I said, that in each situation you're dealing with Diamond, you're going to get probably talking to a different person. So like I said, that one guy was told you don't have enough books. Someone had a lot of books was told your marketing isn't good. So it could be that, to me, I would say that if you're going to pitch to any
distributor 3 books if it's a series to have ready. That way that you can, because normally an indie is not going to do a monthly book. That's Marvel and DC's land. They can afford to do that. We can't afford to put out a book every month, so we're quarterly.
Right.
So that gives you a whole year, almost a whole year of books to push out. While number 3 is getting ready to pitch, you should be finishing up issue number 4. And Diamond does net 30, and it's a net 30 payment. So 30 days is when you get paid.
In theory,
yeah. Well,
I heard some horror stories.
Yeah,
it's in theory it's 30
right.
days.
It's supposed to be 30. So, but if they're sending you a paper check, it's going to be on that 30th day that they're going to mail it out.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, were you going to mention crowdfunding?
No, that's crowdfunding.
Okay. So,
That's another.
relatively speaking, the amount of money that we make from Diamond is way smaller than the amount of money that we make from crowdfunding, which is why you're starting to see a lot of independent creators just saying, I'm not even going to bother with that. Which, honestly, a lot of months through Diamond, we don't break even. So I can't really blame comic book creators for saying, I'm just not even going to deal with Diamond. But I'm sorry?
Diamond is the distribution. They distribute comics into stores, like all the stores around the country and everything. It's a distributor, you know, just like Coca-Cola, you know, they get stuff in the stores.
Right.
That's
If
what Diamond.
you've been into a comic shop, you'll see the big catalog that says previews on the front of it. So they've been the biggest distributor, the only distributor of comic books to stores.
Decades.
Decades.
Yeah. And now you got 2 more, Lunar and Penguin, that have broken in there, and they kind of took Marvel and DC away from that.
Yeah,
So,
what Grant is about to talk about as far as crowdfunding, the good thing about Diamond, you know, is that they get you attention. You know, they distribute a book, they actually get you attention on your book. So by the time we get to the crowdfunding, you know, we got like an audience, and they'll tell you a little bit more about how all that goes.
Yeah, so so as we were saying, Diamond has been the only name in the game for a really long time. And one of the things that has made comic book has really revolutionized the idea of independent comic books is crowdfunding. Because if you guys listen to what independent comic book creating was like before Kickstarter, for instance, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, the guys who created the Ninja Turtles, they had a rich uncle who gave them money to start their comic book. Not everybody has a rich uncle. The great thing about crowdfunding is it's a way to get funding for your comic book and not go massively in debt and not be relying on Diamond. So,
You guys ever heard of Kickstarter? Okay.
So the big thing about Kickstarter, so I feel like people who are going on Kickstarter now want more and more of the book finished before they're willing to put down their hard-earned money. And this is another like dirty little secret about independent comic book creating that nobody wants to talk about, which is that making independent comic books is expensive. Like when you look at these stages, the thing you have to remember is every single person who did one of these stages is going to want money up front.
Except you.
Right. So that's the beauty. That's why I do most of the work on my comic book. It's not like I think I'm the greatest colorist in the world. It's because I want to avoid having to hire another colorist. But so not only does it cost money to print these comic books, it costs money to hire the people who are going to help you with this. So that's another thing. If you guys who are interested in writing comic books, if you don't also draw, I highly suggest learning at least one of these stages. I'm not saying that you need to become Michelangelo or anything, but if you can even do like the lettering, that really helps you out and really saves you money.
another thing too is, you know, he has his process. I used to draw, but I have no patience for drawing anymore, so I don't really get into that. But I still have a, you know, work a 9-to-5 job, so I put money aside, you know, for this. You know, this is a little bit more than a hobby now. You know, for this to actually put back into it. So it's basically believing in my own work to put money into it to actually make it happen. He said comics do cost a lot of money to put together. So you know how it is. So when you put that personal investment in it, you know, you get a lot, you know, you get a lot more out of it. You put more of yourself into it. When you go into, like, you know, shops and stuff and go to cons and talk to people, you have a personal investment in it. And the crowdfunding sort of, like, you know, enhances the thing, because you could tell, like, a lot of people bought it through your friends, through online and everything, to sort of get everybody together to help you put out your book.
Yeah, so that's where social media comes in. And I know a lot of people, myself included, complain about social media, but quite frankly, social media has been a godsend as far as helping the little guy compete with Image and Dark Horse and the bigger companies, because all of a sudden, you know, we don't have to spend $10,000 putting an advertisement for our comic book in, like, a trade magazine. Now we can just go on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and post pictures of our comic books, and people start following it. People get interested in it. The big thing that I try to reiterate with every young comic book creator is a newsletter. Try to get a newsletter. Try to get people signed up for your newsletter. Like, we go to these conventions, and honestly, like, when I sell a comic book, every time I sell a comic book, I say, hey, do you want to sign up for my newsletter? And honestly, the email address is almost, like, more important than the $5 that I charge for the comic book. Because what you're doing is, you don't want a one-time customer. You want to make that person a lifetime customer, so that when you put out the next comic book, they'll think, oh yeah, I met him at Three Rivers Con and that comic book was cool.
Well, Grant's saying half of this game is making sure people know your stuff is out there through all the media and everything that's out there. You got, like, Netflix stuff on TV, stuff in the movies, comic book stuff, all this content out there, and you're competing with all that, you know, trying to get people to give their time to read your stuff. So getting, like you said, the newsletter, you know, getting people to sign up for the list and everything is like half the battle. Even, like you said, worth more than, like, the $5 people put down, so they can still remember that you're out there doing your thing.
And
Red and blue laser, right?
the other thing is, like, no matter how much you promote your comic book, 3 days after your Kickstarter is over, at least one person will say, wait a minute, you have a new comic book coming out? So there's no such thing as too much promotion.
Oh, yeah.
Every day, all day. I mean, it's going a crowdfunder, and Grant will attest to this because I complain about it. It's like having a little shop. And when I did my first one, I went in panic mode almost. I hit the button to launch it, and then I left the house for, like, I didn't check my messages or anything for that whole entire hour. It's offending, and it's something that you have to get used to over time, because that's your marketing. That's your marketing. You have to communicate with people when you're going into this process.
Do you guys have any questions? Who's in here? Because I know you said that you got an idea in development. How far? Well, you know, I'm sorry. Any questions?
Yeah. There's a range.
Mm-hmm.
What's it going to cost a young artist to put out their first comic? Is it going to be like 24 pages? They have no market whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't have people buying their stuff. They haven't done it. That first book, what's it like? I mean, if you do the art, it's going to be one price. If you don't, if you have to hire.
That's why it's hard for us to put a price on it, because there's so many variables. Like, if you're talking about a 20-page floppy, that's completely different than if you want to put out, like, a full trade paperback. But I mean, I could say maybe if you What? I mean, I was gonna say per page. I was gonna say.
It really just depends, because if you're a creator that knows how to do all your artwork, like Grant was saying, then it saves you a bunch of money. But if you're not a younger artist just writing, you got to pay, you got to get somebody to do it, either do it for the love or do it for,
I don't
for payment and everything.
Yeah, I was hoping there was a number, so some of the young people.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I would say if you do none of the artwork, you can get a decent looking comic book for, what would you say, like $80 a page?
Okay.
And I mean, and that's, well, but then we even have to throw in black and white. Black and white. I mean, you could probably get like a decent page for less than that. Like I said, I at least recommend it. I recommend that writers at least try to learn how to do the lettering, because, like I said, that saves you a lot of money. I know letterers hate to hear that, because it makes it sound like I'm devaluing their work, but I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's going to buy your comic book based on the lettering.
So to answer your question, I'm a writer, so I pay my artist and pay my letter and everything. All done, you're looking at about almost $4,000 for a 24 page. For 24 page.
That's one book.
That's just one book.
Yeah, I mean,
How many copies of these?
Oh, we haven't even gotten to going to a printer to get how many copies. It really just depends on where you get your printing done.
Does that include the printing?
It does not include the printing.
So that's what I was saying before, is that the more you print, the cheaper it is.
Right.
Like if you're saying that I'm going to go to a local printer in the city of Pittsburgh and get my book printed, I want 25 copies. You're talking about like $3.50 to $4 a book.
Don't do that.
No. If you're going to go to like the ones we comic impressions, like I said, it depends. But I mean, when you're doing a book, your goal is to get it as printed as cheap as possible.
It's cheap as possible.
I mean, and if you can find a place to do it for under $1, that's where you go to print. I don't care where it is.
But good quality.
Yeah.
Good quality print.
If it's United States, if it's China, if it's Russia, wherever.
So we're gonna try with the next comic book that I'm doing. We're gonna try with a comic book printer from Taiwan, and you can probably tell by the trepidation in my voice. That, I mean, the hard thing about that is you don't get to see a copy before they print it. Like, with an American-made printer, they give you a proof. And, with the Chinese printer, I mean, it would cost them almost as much to ship it over here as it would be to just, like, print it out.
So. You got to deal with pirates and things like that may be still in comic books. They could board the ship and just they leave the luxury cars and stuff behind and take Grant's comic books.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
I was interested in Kickstarter. I feel like wouldn't Kickstarter favor people with like a more of a built-in audience? I see that a lot. Like someone who has they do YouTube videos. They do.
I would say that Indiegogo is the one where you have to bring the audience. Kickstarter is in rank, which means that they have a huge audience that they're sending out newsletters to when the book launches. So Kickstarter, in some ways, you can get away with not having a built-in audience. If you're going like, was it Indiegogo, Fund My Comic, any of those other ones that have propped up after Kickstarter came out, you're going to have to build an audience and bring them with you, because the way their system works is that they don't have that probably list of 2 to 3 million people that they can send things to.
And it's like with any like these social media platforms algorithm, the more you do, the better, the more money they see you're making, the more money they'll make. So they'll push your stuff out more, So, but it starts with bringing your audience to the platform to get everything started, So you just got to do your due diligence on that end and not expect to get on Kickstarter and say, okay, give me money. That's not how it works. So you got to do your stuff. If they see that you're doing your stuff really good, then we'll push some of your stuff out a little bit more than the other person who's not really doing as much work.
Aren't you on Tyler James' list?
Yes.
That's how I know.
Yes. I was actually about to say He has a really good podcast, Tyler James. So you may want to check his stuff out. A really good podcast he puts out every week. That talks about nothing but Kickstarter, crowdfunding, and gives you really good information on comics and content and all that stuff and how to put it out.
Yeah, I mean, most of what we know about crowdfunding we learned from listening to that podcast.
Yeah.
What's it called? Comics Launch?
Comics Launch. Yeah, Comics Launch podcast.
And Gamal Hennessy, he says, the secret to crowdfunding is you got that crowd. What you were talking about with that newsletter, build that crowd.
Build that crowd, yeah.
Right, and newsletters are your lifeline because it's directly to a person. On Facebook and Instagram like that. Like I said, you get caught up in that algorithm where people find out seeing this stuff. If you've got a list with 10,000 people on it, you're hitting their mailbox. So that's direct marketing.
So I always worry when we do these things that I'm scaring people away from making a comic book. I think you raise a good point where the best part of crowd, it's a double-edged sword because it's like, you can't build a crowd without having a good comic book, but you can't have a good comic book without having the crowd. So if you don't have a big following, try to do everything you can to build that following, but ultimately don't say to yourself, I'm not going to put out a comic book because I don't have the following yet. Because one of the best ways to build a following is to be putting out good comic books.
I mean, and follow your dream. Like, don't let the poison in the water tell you that you got an antidote for it. The antidote is your own imagination. So I mean, it doesn't have to be overnight. Like you can take your time, build over time. Like I said, I started back in 2003. I didn't finish my first comic until 2010. Right? Because it was something where all the information that we're giving you wasn't there. We had to build all that stuff and figure it out on our own, and I was lost. And
There's so many more resources now for comic book creators.
So when it came to building, like, because my challenge that I've had, like, I haven't put a lot. It's just been something that I know I want to do, but I haven't really sat on island to get to it. Like, I have an idea for the story, but it's just a matter of figuring out how do I translate the story into. I guess you guys are saying you write scripts, and then from scripts to panels. So it's like you said, you got 9 issues out now. So like when you first started writing it, did you write out a story and translate to a script? And if you did that, how did you know? Like, did you know, okay, this much of the script is going to be my first issue, or you didn't know what was?
We didn't even mention outline, so that's a key. That's a key concept. So if you got that idea, start outlining it to these are my main points. This is what I want to hit. If it's the one idea, you got a big idea, so start making, and then you start gradually taking those little ideas and breaking those into little outlines until you get to a point where, okay, well, I got like I got all these little trees on the outline, and then I plug in your story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a good answer as far as like how like how much information can you put on a page before you have to move on to like the next page. The way that I've done that is just from reading a lot of comic books. And for me, my litmus test when I'm writing a comic book is I start thinking to myself, okay, if I was reading this comic book, would I be starting to get bored now? And that's kind of where the like pacing. I think what you're trying to ask about is like how do you pace out a comic book? And I think that's one of the hardest things.
Right. So I mean, that's a perfect segue. I'm going to turn this thing over. I'm going to talk about real quick. Is that I've made multiple changes to the story. I didn't have any idea where it was going, and a lot of the times it's when people start reading it and you start talking to them about it, you get other ideas. And one of the things that ended up happening was this character, Mystic, where we're figuring out what these swords that he's carrying around. And we decided to go backwards and say, other people had these swords before. What happens when they start communicating with him through the swords and try to tell him what to do? How does he react to that? Does he tell him to get lost, or does it change him as a character? And it kind of goes both ways, where they're in his head continuously telling him, hey, I didn't get to finish this before I died. Can we do this? And he's, no, leave me alone, leave me alone. And eventually, he's either going to snap or he has to do it to show him. And this was not part of the original story. And it was actually a whole separate story that ended up getting merged into it. So we're going backwards all the way to Excalibur. So those swords are Excalibur. And King Arthur is one of the people that's talking to him, telling him, I need you to do something to finish what I didn't get to finish before I died.
That leads me to my next one. So my story, my idea actually includes actual fictional people from history.
Okay.
What's
Is it public domain?
So that's my question. Let's say like for instance, like Martin Luther King is part of my story, right? Part of a character.
I don't know. I don't know if it's a real guy. I know that there's a difference.
Yeah. How would you do that?
I mean, he's a public figure.
I could get sued for doing that, right?
No. I mean,
I can help you. Write down the name Jamal Hennessy. Jamal Hennessy is a comic book attorney, and he wrote a book called The Business of Independent Comic Book Publishing, and he'll give you a free half-hour consultation, and they'll walk you through using a public domain figure. And I can already tell you have worked with him for years. First thing he's going to tell you is you're not going to do Dr. King's name. You get a figure, Dr. Marcus Ruler. Or something like that. Change the name, but have a pseudonym.
So I strongly urge people, if they're going to do public domain, be very, very careful. Because, I mean, I know I do a comic book called Beowulf, but the guy who wrote Beowulf is like 3,000 years old. He's not going to sue me. And I know everybody's going out and they're so excited to do their new Mickey Mouse comic books. The thing is, if you make one little mistake, $1 trillion company is going to come down. Because because just because something is public domain doesn't mean everything is public domain. Like there's really weird laws like
Superman will be in public domain in about the next few years.
But if you show him flying, then you're going to get sued.
Right. It's the original Superman from the first issue.
From
who couldn't fly.
Right.
And you have to make the S symbol look exactly like it did in that first issue. So me personally, I'm not going to mess with this. But I mean,
but it also depends on the age of the character. So you're saying I can use Robin Hood, can't use Flash Gordon. I can use Conan. I can't have Conan's name in the book or on the cover.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's all types of weird laws. Like everybody goes on and on. Like, oh, Conan the Barbarian is public domain. Now let's go make our Conan the Barbarian comic book. But if you make one little mistake, the Robert E. Howard family can sue you. One other thing that I wanted to mention that I think will help people, like kind of what we were talking about earlier, is I work with an editor, and a lot of young comic book creators. Now, there's a difference between a proofreader and an editor. An editor will give you story suggestions, and I strongly urge
and make sure that your story makes sense and is in continuity.
Because that's one thing. When you're writing a comic book, it'll sometimes seem like it makes sense to you, and then other people read it and they're like, "Wait a minute! It feels like you left out a scene here."
Yeah.
And that's
one little detail. Fans will call you out.
Having an editor and or having beta readers is a really good idea. And another thing is, you don't have to take the editor or the beta reader's advice. You can, like, sometimes you're going to get bad advice, and that's when you just say, sorry, I don't like that idea.
And then I strongly encourage that when you're writing dialogue, say it out loud. So that if it makes sense when you say it out loud, then it'll make sense when someone is reading it and trying to create that voice in their head.
So when you, like, for my instance, I don't draw. So let's say I write my story, I have my script, I have all that figured out. Now I need to go and figure out the illustrators. You go and find people who draw illustrators. You go to that person, you give them the idea of what you want these characters to look like. What does the ownership look like? Because technically you created the character, you wrote it, but they created the image of it.
So you would have to work that out with the artist.
Right.
In my opinion, if they're visually figuring out what the character is going to look like, they should at least get some ownership in it.
That's called a work. That's what I call the work for hire agreement. And in the work for hire agreement, and all you up, it says who owns what. And once you sign a work for hire agreement, that's what they say. You own 100% of the character. You own 100% of it. If that's what's agreed to.
Right.
If you don't agree to it, and I can tell you right now, you won't own 100%, because if you don't, and you want to publish a book and the artist doesn't, you're dead. That's why he have work for hire agreement.
For my third and fourth issue, I went on Upwork. I went through all the artists that were looking for work, found my artists. They have all the agreements there. So anything that, is done on Upwork, all the agreements are there. They know what the deal is. So when you hire them, that's it. I don't even have to do any work or whatever. So
Fiverr's another.
Yeah, Fiverr as well.
What I said is that you're kind of want to be able to work with someone that you trust, and you don't want a situation where that kind of stuff comes up. And I can pretty much tell you that what I was thinking is that Invincible was that problem. There was a lot of ownership problems with that, because they had two different artists on that, and their agreements were someone gets a cut of this when it goes to animation, and it blew up in their faces because that person didn't get what they were supposed to do. So that was Corey Walker and Ryan Stegman. They had problems with when it went to animation. They didn't get what they were supposed to get.
So my next question is, how do you, like, when you come up with your story, your script, or whatever you're doing, how do you keep other people, like, let's say I'm going to other illustrators, how do I keep that illustrator from taking my story or running with it? Do you copyright your stuff, or
you better copyright it?
That's what I'm saying. So what do you
as soon as you get it, you send it to the Library of Congress. Within 6 months, you'll know if you have a copyright.
But you can't copyright an idea.
That's what I'm saying.
Anybody can have an idea. You can once you put it down in your outline, your story specifics, that stuff you can copyright, but you can't copyright an idea.
You don't have to copyright. You want copyright.
Okay.
We got about 4 more minutes left. Does anybody have any?
Hey, you guys have a newsletter I can sign up for, and everybody can sign up for?
Oh yeah, yeah. So ComicsBurgh.com. Go onto our website. ComicsBurgh.com, spelled is no funky spelling or whatever. That's where you get all our information, all our comic stuff, all our newsletter stuff.
Yeah, if you click the button that says free comic book, there's 2 different.
Or because I'm about to tablet here, somebody wants
to. There you go.
Sign up.
That too. So yeah, if you want to come up and sign, while we got time and everything, go sign up for our newsletter right there.
And my first newsletter came on the day, but I want to sign up. Hey, sorry.
There you go. It's all good and everything. I'm DP Brown. I'm the writer and creator of The Theme of Thieves. So you'll find that on the website if you like a good time travel mystery in the Lost Quantum Leap, wire instances.
When's your next Kickstarter coming out? Because I supported your last one.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you. My next Kickstarter will be out probably later this year for issue 5.
My name is Grant Lankard. I do a comic book called Beowulf. I have a booth over there. You can go to ComicsBurgh.com. If you click on the button that says free comic book, you sign up for my newsletter. Not only will you get my newsletter roughly every month, you will also get a free comic book. So check that out. My next Kickstarter is the Beowulf trade paperback, which is going to be at the end of this month.
And I'm Marvin Wynn. I'm the writer of The Edge. My next Kickstarter will be in August for the Volume 2 trade. I will have the Volume 1 trade, and then I'm doing another Kickstarter in October for the Blaine trade.
You have one more question?
I know you said you're on what episode? You're on issue 9, you're on issue 5, and what issue is your comic on?
I'm on 4. Well, I got all 4 issues ready now. I'll be on issue 5 now.
How far out do you have it planned out as far as issues? I know you might be on issue now. As far as your story, do you have it planned out to like?
Mine's is to 24. I got 24.
So you already got it planned out that far.
So I don't do an ongoing series. I do mini series, and that's for a lot of different reasons. But one of the big reasons why is because that way I can just plan out one story.
I originally planned to go to issue 25, but I kind of broke free of that. And I'll take it as long as it goes, and then maybe she'll take over.
There we go. Hey, thank you guys for coming to our panel. We definitely appreciate you. All right. Appreciate all your questions, and you enjoy your con, and come over to our booth if you haven't already.
Yeah, you can't miss it. You see the big ComicsBurgh.
Thank you guys. We shall talk to you soon.
Is your Beowulf comic like the whole Beowulf story, or do you just use?
No, it's modernized.